everyone, I'm Miss Carrie from Monroe Street Art Center. Thank you so much for purchasing our May art kit, which not only is our last art kit, but it's also in partnership with Days, an organization that does a lot of really amazing things in Dane County, and we're honored to be able to collaborate with them on this kit. For this project, we're going to be painting frames, and these mat board frames were graciously donated by Monroe Street Framing, so thank you to them. They're our neighbors on Monroe Street, and we are going to use some untraditional materials to paint these floral frames. And let's get started. Okay, so let's get started making our floral frames. As you can see, each art kit has a mat board frame included. And as I mentioned, there's some untraditional painting materials. So what we are going to be using to make the flowers on our frame are a spoon and a pencil. So these flowers that I've chosen to paint on this frame are reminiscent of lilacs. And this is a bit like a tulip. Sort of a unusually shaped tulip. And these are both flowers that are typically blooming around this time of year, in springtime, around Mother's Day. Lilacs are one of my favorite floral scents. And so they're a really fun flower to be able to paint on this frame. Everyone's frames probably look a bit differently. This one that I had painted for a sample was white. This one is a little bit of a linen type color, and it has a bit of a texture to it. Some of the frames are black, some are blue. Whichever color frame you have, they will all work wonderfully. So I'm gonna start out, I have my surface covered since I am gonna be painting. And then I've taken each of the colors that were received in the kit, and I've placed them on a palette because I'm gonna wanna do some color mixing so that I can get some differences in the tints and shades that I have on my flowers. So I'm gonna start out doing the red flowers first. And those red flowers, remember, are a bit like a tulip, and so I'm actually gonna use a spoon for those. So the way that I'm gonna make the shape is by using the bottom of the spoon. And I'm going to start out by just sort of dipping that bottom part of the spoon in my red paint. I don't want a ton, but I want it to be covered. And then I'm gonna go onto the frame, and you can decide where you wanna place them, but I'm going to press the spoon from bottom to top onto the frame. And so it gives the shape of a petal. And I'm going to continue to do that a few times. So just sort of repeat that a couple of times. You might get some drips that'll happen, and that's okay, because it's sort of part of the character of painting with an untraditional material. When I'm ready to make my second flower, I'm gonna turn my frame slightly and make another one. If you happen to get too much paint in one spot of your frame, just use the spoon and press it from, bottom to top or side to side in order to kind of help that paint spread out. And I think I will make a couple more tulips on my frame. Okay, so now I have a few tulips placed sporadically throughout my frame, and it's time to just let that red paint dry. I'm gonna set my spoon to the side because I'm actually all done with that tool. And I am going to move forward and start painting the lilacs onto my frame. So in order to do that, I am going to use the purple and the white, but I also would like to mix the two together so that I can have a lighter tone of purple. So I'm gonna be using kind of like 3 different colors on each lilac. So I'm gonna get some of my purple paint and put it into the place between the white and the purple. I'm gonna scoop a little bit of paint and then mix those together so that I can have this sort of lavender shade, or tint actually, because it's mixed with white. It's called a tint. Okay, so I'm going to place my paintbrush into the water off the side because I am not going to use the brush to paint my lilacs. And usually when you see lilacs on a bush or tree, you'll notice that towards the branch is where the color is a bit darker, and then it gets lighter the farther out it goes onto the bloom. So I'm gonna start with just the straight purple first, then I'll move to the tint that I created that mixed purple and white together, and then I'll also finally use bits of white on top of that as well. So in order to get started on those, I'm gonna use the end of my pencil to make these shapes that mimic a flower on a lilac. So when you think of lilacs on a bush, it's a lot of tiny little flowers that group together. So I'm going to start by dipping my eraser into the paint, and then I'm just going to dot it onto my frame. The other thing about lilacs is they're a bit of like a cone shape. So they're going to be sort of wider at the bottom and then come to almost a point towards the end. So I'm going to mimic that as well. So I'm starting out by dotting my purple, and just like with the spoon, if you get too much paint in one spot, you can just use your eraser to kind of grab that paint and then move it around on the frame. Continue to make my dots. And now I think that that's enough of the darker color. And I'm going to go ahead and start with the lighter tint of purple. So I'm going to use a paper towel to just wipe off that excess paint and then gently dip into the color that I had mixed. I like to overlap the two colors a bit. So I'm not gonna start all the way out here. I'm gonna overlap it with the place where I had already started painting with the darker purple. And then just continue to make my dots and grow my lilac. Okay, now after I've made a fair amount of the lighter purple dots, I'm gonna go back and use a bit of the white paint and add some white dots as well. Not nearly as many as the light purple and dark purple, but it just adds a little bit of interest and a little bit more kind of highlights onto the flowers. Okay, now I have my first lilac, and I'm going to continue making them throughout the frame. Okay, so now I have painted all of my lilacs, and I'm going to use, this is the only time I'm gonna use a paintbrush on this painting project, and I am going to use it so that I can add just some little bit of leaves and stems around my flowers. And you can add as much or as little greenery as you would like. I just think it adds a nice touch to have a little bit of green with your flowers. Okay, so now that I have all of my leaves and stems painted on, I think I have as many as I would like to add, I'm gonna go ahead and let this paint dry before I do the final step. Okay, so now once my paint has dried on my flowers, I am just gonna go back in and add a really light amount of detail with my fine point Sharpie. And this is a step that is sort of optional. You can do it if you want to. If you really love your flowers the way that they look, then you're welcome to leave them and not add any more Sharpie details. But this is a step that just sort of defines the edges of some of your blooms. And I just sort of go in and add a few outlines onto some of my lilacs and around the leaves and greenery that I've painted for my tulips. Because some of the areas where the spoon was used to paint have a bit of irregular shapes, adding the Sharpie detail just sort of helps you define the edges of your flowers. Again, if you choose to. Not required, but just sort of a nice touch if you wish to do so. You might want to add some definition within the flower about where the petals overlap. And I'm just going to do this lightly around the entire piece. There we are. My floral frame is now complete, and you can either keep this for yourself and put a photograph of someone special to you, or you can put a photograph of you and someone special and give it as a gift, whether it's to celebrate Mother's Day or to send to a grandparent or just someone special in your life. Thank you so much for painting this frame with me. Bye.